the news.
Hi, I'm Tessa with Brainrot News with a few bits of news for you to choke on from March 22nd. The latest masterstroke from the Trump administration is a bold new plan to dismantle the Department of Education and scatter its essential functions across an already gutted federal bureaucracy. I guess streamlining efficiency is handing off a $1.6 trillion student loan portfolio to the Small Business Administration, an agency that's coincidentally firing nearly half of its workforce. Perfect timing! Maybe they can just let ChatGPT manage federal loans at this point. And where, pray tell, will vital nutrition programs for low-income children and programs for special needs students end up? Health and Human Services. That would be the same Health and Human Services currently under the watchful, vaccine-skeptical, big pharma conspiracy-loving eye of RFK Jr. Yep, the guy who believes vaccines cause autism and people with mental health issues need a wellness farm. That's who will be overseeing public school lunch programs and disability services. What could possibly go wrong? Maybe he'll replace free lunches with a daily serving of ivermectin and lead filling. The right-wing argument here, of course, is that this will reduce inefficiency and administrative load, because the real problem in education isn't skyrocketing tuition or crushing student debt. It's that the Department of Education dared to exist in the first place. Conservatives have been salivating over dismantling it since Reagan, and now with a Republican Congress and the strategic incompetence of the Trump administration, they just might pull it off. Let's be real, this isn't about making government more efficient. It's about taking a wrecking ball to public education, making it harder for students to afford college, gutting support for low-income children and the disabled, all while handing over control to agencies that are actively being hollowed out from within. The SBA won't have the staffing to manage student loans. HHS under RFK Jr. won't prioritize disability programs. The entire system is being set up to fail, and when it does, Republicans will smugly point and say, see, government doesn't work. If you're wondering what the end game is, it's pretty simple. Kill public education, drive students into the arms of predatory lenders, prevent disabled children from learning, and replace school lunches with a pamphlet about the benefits of bootstraps. Of course, all of this will be branded as empowering the states and reducing federal waste, while in reality, it's just another way to punish poor, disabled, and working-class Americans for daring to exist. So buckle up, folks. The war on public education just found a new front, and this time it's armed with mass layoffs, bureaucratic chaos, and RFK Jr.'s galaxy-brained approach to science. What an unfortunate time to be alive. Turkey, where democracy is always on the menu but somehow never quite fully cooked. This time, Erdogan has decided that elections are just too unpredictable, so he's going for the classic authoritarian move, throwing his main political rival, Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu, in jail on a totally legitimate, completely fabricated cocktail of charges, like embezzlement, corruption, and of course terrorism links. When all else fails, just slap a terrorist label on your opponent and call it a day. Naturally, the people of Turkey aren't buying it. Mass protests have erupted across Istanbul, Ankara, Izmir, and beyond, with thousands defying public gathering bans to take to the streets. In true strongman fashion, Erdogan's response has been to send in the riot police, start cracking skulls, and make mass arrests, because nothing says this isn't a dictatorship like tear gas and batons. Meanwhile, the opposition, Republican People's Party, isn't backing down. They're calling this exactly what it is: a blatant attempt to sideline the only real challenger to Erdogan's increasingly autocratic rule. In a power move straight out of a political thriller, they've announced they're nominating İmamoğlu for the presidency, whether he's behind bars or not, because if you're gonna fight authoritarianism, you might as well make a show of it. The fallout? Well, Turkey's financial markets are tanking. The lira, stocks, and bonds are all in freefall because, shocker, investors don't love political instability and creeping dictatorship. Erdogan doesn't seem too concerned, probably because international reaction has been as weak as ever. The West, ever the champion of democracy, is offering the usual mild expressions of concern, which Erdogan will no doubt interpret as a green light to just keep jailing opposition leaders until there's no one left. This isn't about just one man. İmamoğlu's arrest is just the latest sign that Erdogan is done pretending Turkey is a democracy. He's been consolidating power for years, crushing the press, purging the judiciary, and now quite literally arresting his way out of an election. If the opposition doesn't fight back hard, and if the people don't refuse to back down, Turkey might be looking at the final nail in the coffin of its democracy. The question now, will this be Erdogan's undoing, or will he succeed in making himself Turkey's president for life? Because right now it's looking like the only real election happening is between democracy and dictatorship, and Erdogan is making sure the ballot box is rigged before anyone gets to vote. Ah yes, another thrilling episode of Middle East geopolitics, the never-ending war edition. This time, Israel and Hezbollah are back at it, proving once again that ceasefire is more of a polite suggestion than an actual policy. So what happened? A few rockets. 6 were fired, 3 got through and were intercepted by Israel. No one officially took credit, but let's be real, it was almost certainly Hezbollah. If there's one thing Hezbollah loves more than destabilizing Lebanon, it's poking Israel with just enough force to provoke a response. And of course, Israel, being Israel, was never going to sit this one out. Both camps have mastered the art of blame shifting, ensuring that no one side ever steps back to break the cycle. Netanyahu's retaliation resulted in at least 6 deaths, one of which was a child. Others had multiple injuries. This is a reminder that when you build the conditions for endless conflict, you end up playing demolition derby on repeat. Amid this orchestrated chaos, the UN stands as the lone, disillusioned mediator, urging both parties to honor ceasefire agreements and break free from the self-perpetuating madness. Their calls for peace, reminders of disarmament, and troop withdrawals fall on ears that have long since tuned out as the relentless drumbeat of war marches on. In this tragic comedy, the endless war isn't an accident. It's the product of calculated choices by all players. Both Israel and its adversaries have built a system where peace is optional and conflict is the default setting, ensuring that the bloodshed continues indefinitely. In what can only be described as an epic misallocation of resources, the Trump administration has commandeered thousands of federal agents from the FBI, DEA, and ATF to ramp up an immigration crackdown that reeks of panic and prejudice. While these agents are busy corralling so-called illegal immigrants, as if they're the masterminds of every national security threat, serious crimes like child exploitation, drug trafficking, and financial fraud are being left to fester in the shadows. Critics are right to point out that this strategy isn't just short-sighted, it's a downright assault on the very idea of national security. By diverting law enforcement away from genuine criminal investigations, we're witnessing a dangerous gamble, betting on a xenophobic narrative while ignoring the real threats that plague our society. Trump's rhetoric about an invasion of legal immigrants is nothing short of a manufactured crisis, designed to justify his authoritarian playbook. Homeland Security officials claim this move is essential, but when your priorities shift from protecting citizens from violent crimes to policing borders with the fervor of a paranoid gatekeeper, it becomes clear that the real agenda is about consolidating power while stoking fear. Meanwhile, immigration-related arrests have spiked. At its core, this isn't just about immigration, it's about diverting attention from systemic failures and real security challenges. The decision to redirect thousands of agents is a stark reminder that in this administration, political theater takes precedence over effective governance, and the very notion of justice is just sacrificed on the altar of ideological hatred. Truly, this is the kind of policy that lets you really know national security has become a convenient excuse for massive mismanagement and outright discrimination. Leland Dudek, Trump's personally appointed Social Security chief, has generously decided not to shut down the entire agency, after a federal judge patiently explained that following the law does not in fact require nuking Social Security. Similar to the way a parent explains to a child you can't only have candy, Dudek had previously insisted that a court ruling designed only to keep Elon Musk from rummaging through unredacted personal data would somehow force the SSA to close up shop like a failing Trump casino. Fortunately, U.S. District Judge Ellen Lipton Hollander stepped in to remind him that her decision did not, in fact, order the destruction of the Social Security Administration, but rather just told Musk he couldn't play cyber detective with private data. Upon realizing that a billionaire not getting his way is not the same thing as government collapse, Dudek quickly reversed course. Now let's talk about the real reason behind this manufactured crisis. The Trump administration and Musk had argued that limitless access to personal data was essential for cracking down on rampant Social Security fraud. The only problem is, Social Security fraud is about as common as a functioning NFT project. According to the SSA's Inspector General, improper payments, including both fraud and honest mistakes, amount to less than 1% of the $8.6 trillion in benefits paid out over several years. Yet Dudek and Musk acted like seniors were running some kind of elaborate Ponzi scheme, when in reality most fraud cases involve people forgetting to file paperwork or government clerical errors. So to recap, Social Security remains open, Musk doesn't get to cosplay as Big Brother, and Dudek just got a crash course in not declaring government shutdowns based on billionaire tantrums. A happy ending for everyone, except of course for Musk and Donald. They now have to find a new hobby. Maybe they can start by fixing their own fraud-ridden companies. In his latest episode of Authoritarian Cosplay, Donald Trump has decided to revoke the security clearances of several prominent Democrats, including Kamala Harris, Hillary Clinton, and Joe Biden. Also his entire family, because apparently political grudges now come in bulk, along with Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, who, fun fact, are Republicans but committed the unforgivable crime of not worshipping him. The official explanation? National interest. The actual reason? Petty revenge with a side of deep-seated insecurity. Traditionally, former presidents and senior officials keep their clearances so they can provide experienced counsel on national security matters. Trump has never been a fan of tradition, unless it involves dodging taxes or inciting insurrections. Critics, or anyone who has taken a civics class, argue that this move is nothing more than political retribution, targeting individuals who have publicly opposed him. When you're running the government like a reality TV show, you really need some primetime drama, like stripping your enemies of security clearances. The real irony here is that the guy who stashed nuclear documents in his golf club's bathroom is suddenly very concerned about classified information. This is the same man who once suggested injecting bleach to cure COVID, but sure, Hillary Clinton is the security risk. European central banking officials are quietly panicking over whether the U.S. Federal Reserve will continue to provide critical dollar funding under President Donald Trump. While the Fed itself hasn't suggested any changes to its global financial support, officials across Europe have started asking the question that keeps world leaders up at night. What if Trump wakes up one day and just decides to break it? After watching Trump run foreign policy like a particularly unhinged Twitter thread, do you blame them? Traditionally, the Fed provides crucial dollar funding to keep global markets stable, and Eurozone banks, which rely heavily on these credit lines, would prefer not to see the entire system thrown into uncertainty because he had a bad day. But after witnessing Trump govern like a wrecking ball in a gold-plated suit, European officials are quietly gaming out nightmare scenarios like the US government pressuring the Fed to cut off international access, or replacing the dollar with some kind of MAGA-backed crypto disaster. Of course, the likelihood of this happening is still considered low, but the fact that Europe is even having these conversations speaks volumes about Trump's reputation for, let's say, unpredictable leadership. This is, after all, the same man who once suggested defaulting on US debt like it was a bad casino loan. For now, Europe is stuck hoping that the Fed remains independent and that Trump is too distracted suing the news. Donald Trump has once again demonstrated his talent for making life as difficult as possible for vulnerable people, revoking the legal status of 530,000 immigrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. These individuals, who had been granted temporary humanitarian parole under Biden, now face the terrifying prospect of deportation starting April 24th, because apparently this man can't stand the thought of letting people escape poverty, violence, and political turmoil in peace. The official justification is that previous programs exceeded legal boundaries. The real reason is pure unfiltered xenophobia, served up with a side of authoritarian power flexing. The US government had already vetted these people. They had legal pathways. They had sponsors. They were living their lives. But because cruelty is the point, the Trump administration has decided to throw them into chaos anyway. It doesn't stop there, because why ruin only some lives when you can ruin even more? The administration is also considering revoking the legal status of 240,000 Ukrainians who fled a war zone. The same people who were welcomed as refugees after Russia bombed their homes may now get kicked to the curb because, well, Trump loves playing the immigration hardliner no matter how senseless the policy. Let's be crystal clear, this isn't about law and order. It's not about protecting American jobs. It's not about national security. This is about Trump proving, once again, that his immigration policy is driven by spite, not strategy. There is no economic, legal, or moral justification for throwing 500,000 people, many whom have already built their lives here, into uncertainty overnight. But that's the whole point, isn't it? To make immigrants afraid, to keep people living in fear, to force them into desperation, to tell them that no matter how hard they try to play by the rules can change at any moment. If you think this stops with humanitarian parolees, think again. This is a test run for an even bigger purge. Today it's 530,000 people. Tomorrow it could be millions more, because when your ideology is built on punishing the other, there is no finish line. Once again, the right to control your own reproductive choices is on the ballot in Wisconsin, because in the grand American tradition of freedom, conservatives believe the government should stay out of your wallet but firmly inside of your uterus. The stakes? Just a 175-year-old abortion ban drafted before women could vote or wear pants, potentially being resurrected to criminalize abortion across the state. And who gets to decide? A state Supreme Court race that most people probably don't know is happening. On one side, we have Judge Susan Crawford, who actually thinks women should have the right to make their own medical decisions. Revolutionary. On the other, Brad Schimel, a former attorney general with a proud history of opposing abortion, but who is suddenly playing coy on the issue because even he knows that saying, yes, I want to drag Wisconsin back to the 19th century, is a losing message outside of the Fox News bubble. Instead, Republicans are trying to pivot to immigration and the economy, which is political code for please, please, please ignore the fact that we're trying to control your body. Of course, this isn't just a local issue. The race is drawing national money and attention because post Roe vs. Wade, Republicans have realized the only way to enforce forced birth policies in blue-leaning states is through backdoor power grabs in state courts. They know they can't win on abortion bans outright. Every time it's put to a direct vote, even in deep red states like Kansas and Ohio, the people reject it. So instead, they rely on quiet, down-ballot judicial races to sneak their extremism into law. This is about power, not life. If it were about life, the GOP would be fighting for maternal health care, paid parental leave, and affordable childcare, things they all consistently oppose. Instead, their solution to an unwanted pregnancy is forced birth and vibes. So if you're in Wisconsin, pay attention. This isn't just a judicial election. It's a referendum on whether your rights will be dictated by the ghosts of 1849. If history has taught us anything, it's that when conservatives say they want to return to traditional values, they mean before women had any value at all. The Trump administration's bold new strategy for handling extreme weather: just stop measuring it. In a move that truly captures the spirit of Republican governance, the National Weather Service is slashing the number of weather balloon launches because, surprise, they're laying off so many people that there simply won't be enough hands to let go of the balloon. This, of course, comes just in time for tornado and storm season, because small government is when you make sure you have no idea when a deadly storm is coming. For those unfamiliar, weather balloons collect critical data, temperature, humidity, and wind speeds, all of which feed into forecasting models that help predict everything from thunderstorms to hurricanes. Cutting these launches is like a pilot deciding to fly blind because fuel is expensive, and yet somehow the geniuses in charge have decided that less data equal more efficiency. Where is this happening? Nebraska, South Dakota, Colorado, Wisconsin, Michigan, Wyoming, plus earlier cuts in New York, Maine, and Alaska, all places where extreme weather is a very real and very deadly threat. But don't worry, I'm sure the tornadoes will politely check their schedules before dropping in. Why is this happening? Well, the official reason is government efficiency programs, which is the Orwellian way of saying mass layoffs and cost cutting, because in Republican math, billions for tax cuts, always affordable. Basic public safety infrastructure, too expensive, sorry. And the best part, this will definitely make the weather forecasts worse. Former NOAA officials are basically screaming that reducing data will cripple forecasting models, meaning less accurate storm warnings and more unexpected disasters. At the end of the day, this is just another example of how right-wing governance works. Destroy public services, watch the chaos unfold, and then use that all as an excuse to privatize whatever's left. And if a few thousand people get swept away by a tornado because their local forecast was off, well, as long as they get more tax breaks, it's all worth it. That's all for Brainrot News. Like and subscribe for your regularly scheduled dose of this can't be real, but it absolutely is.